You know what is the secret sauce for every story? It's the problem, the conflict. Without conflict, your story is going to be a boring one. If you ever watch a movie, for example, or a TV show, and it's just a scene, one big scene, or several scenes, and in each one, nobody's experiencing any difficulty, you're going to switch off the TV or you're going to change stations because nothing is there to compel you to continue watching. As adults, especially women of the 90s, 80s, and 90s, when I was around that time as a teenager and young adult, I used to watch my neighbors talking about the young and the restless, bold and beautiful. Even myself, I used to watch Nuts Landing, Falcon Crest. I know of people who watch Dynasty, Dallas. These shows were packed with people who were fans who wanted to see every week when it came to shows like Dallas Dynasty, Nuts Landing. Every week they were there sitting at the edge of their seats, waiting to see what happens next. Who shot JR? Do you remember that? For parents who are, you know, now in their, mid years and would have been able to reflect on those days. Who shot JR? What about Victor Newman? Did he really lie? What about Lisa? I think Lisa had kidnapped Brad in The Young and the Restless. So conflict is compelling. We want to watch it in the movies and TV shows. We want to read it in the books. And as parents and teachers, we need to encourage our children, we need to encourage our students to write stories that have conflict, or else it's just going to be a series of scenes going from one to the other and just not motivating to the readers. So, what is conflict? Conflict is the problem that the character faces in the story. Remember, some weeks ago we talked about characters, and we determined that characters are not only limited to humans like you and me. Characters can be any object, any animal, any element of nature, as long as those non humans are personified by the author, by the poet. We can say that they are characters. So, one thing we must bear in mind that if we even think about some of the most popular stories, particularly traditional stories, we can identify some of the conflicts that the characters faced. Let's think about Cinderella. What do we know about her? We know that she was a child, or a young woman, I should say, a young woman who was treated very badly by her stepmother and stepsisters. So we know that she had lots of problems in the household. In some versions, we learned that her mother had died and her father had remarried. So she is without the love of her biological mother. In some versions, we learned that he went away, her father, that is, went away. So he was not even there. So she didn't have the physical presence of her father. So we know that she would have experienced problems, conflict. And then when she heard about the ball, she didn't have any clothes to wear, no shoes to wear. Her stepmother and step siblings did not want her to go. And so she had to try to bear up because she had that disappointment. Now we know about the fairy godmother and all the rest of things that happen. All right? But from in the beginning, Cinderella faced conflict. Let's think about the three little pigs. Did they experience conflict? Yes, they did. Their mother or grandmother, I can't remember exactly, told them, you know what, you all are grown. It's time for you to be on your own. Go build your homes. So each of them decided that they are going to build their homes using certain materials. But they had a big conflict to face because here it was, there's this big bad wolf coming not only to destroy their house, but to eat them up. So, of course, we see there that the big bad wolf was the catalyst for the conflict that the three pigs faced in the story. Let's think about Goldilocks and the three bears. Did she have any conflict? Yes, she did. When she entered the three bears' home, she probably was a little tired, so she had to make decisions. First, about the chairs. She tried three of them, and it was the last one that she was able to fit into, and it broke. And she started to feel hungry. She went to the kitchen. She saw three bowls of porridge, and she had to make a decision. She tried each of them, and eventually she tried the last one, gobble it all up. And then she got bone tired. She needed to sleep. She went upstairs and she saw the three beds. She tried each of them, and finally she fell asleep in the last bed. And when she woke up, she opened her eyes and she saw three bears looking at her. So, yes, Goldilocks experienced conflict. So, we see whether big or small, the characters in the story that we read do encounter conflict or problems. And when our children, our students, are going to be writing their stories, you need to encourage them to include conflict. But let them understand that there are different kinds of conflict that characters may face. So, one kind of conflict is character versus character. This is when the main character in the story faces conflict or a problem with another character in the story. It can be a physical fight, it can be a battle of words or a battle of wills, it can be a competition. So, a conflict between characters can take different forms. Okay? So, we can consider that. So, one example is two characters in a story. Let's say one is Sheldon and one is Shane. And there's one more position that the coach, the school coach, has to fill. And it's between the two boys, the two characters. And they have to do a playoff or a trial to see which one of them will be able to make the team, which one will be able to get that last spot into the team. So we have there character versus character. Another type of conflict is character versus self. You may actually experience problems with your own self or within yourself. You might be shy. You might lack confidence in your ability. You might have a difficult choice that you need to make. So, that is an internal conflict. That is a conflict within yourself. We also have character versus society. That is when a character in a piece of literature is having a problem or a conflict with the law, for example, or tradition, or an institution, or the society as a whole. And so I love to use the example of the X-Men. If you are a fan of the MC world, Marvel Comics world, you would know about the X-Men. Some X-Men include Magneto, Professor X, Wolverine, Storm, and so on. And they are a minority and they face conflict with the wider society, the human society, the Homo sapiens. The Homo sapiens or the humans want to do two things with these X-Men. They either want to kill them, just get rid of them, or they want to capture them and use them for experiments for their own personal gain. And there are two schools of thoughts when it comes to Magneto and Professor X or Professor Xavier. Magneto believes you just get rid of those humans, kill them because they don't want anything for us. They don't have and they don't have our best interests at heart. So let's just get rid of them. Let's fight fire with fire. That is his way of solving the conflict, and so that lends to public problem solving or conflict resolution. That is his way, Magneto's way. But we have Professor X. He believes, you know what, we're not going to fight. We're not going to fight them. We will try to work with them. We will cooperate with them. We want peaceful relations with them. And that is what leads me to the civil rights activists of the 1960s, 50s, 60s in the United States of America. To me, Malcolm X, especially in his earlier years, not so much his later years, but his earlier years in activism, he was like Magneto. Just, we don't want them. We will do what we have to do to get equality among the whites in the United States of America by any means necessary. And then we have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who believe in protesting but doing it peacefully, peaceful protests, like marching, like boycotting the buses, and so on. All right? So in the stories and the poems that you read or that you write, the characters can experience conflict with society. And we have character versus nature. Character versus nature. Now, when we talk about nature, we're thinking about the natural scheme of things, the natural environment. So a character may face problems or conflict with a volcano. Think about the people in St. Vincent last year, or was it the year before? I can't remember. What about earthquakes, storms, tornadoes? These are examples, hurricanes. These are examples of people having or characters having conflict with nature. A character can be lost at sea and facing those huge waves. That is character versus nature. You could even think about them, a character experiencing conflict with an animal. All right? Like Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf. So we can think about those. We can even go further when it comes to character and the conflicts that they can experience. What about character versus the supernatural? Think about it. Your character in your story that you write, or maybe in the story that you read, may experience conflict with Papa Boa, Laja Bless, Sukunya, Duen, a vampire, a werewolf, Bigfoot. Yes, character versus supernatural. And what about technology? Robots, transformers, character versus technology. Think about Terminator now. Terminator. I love Terminator, but it's not appropriate for children. It has a lot of cursing in it. So it's definitely not appropriate for children or for people who are professing Christians. But there it is. And so we have to consider that characters may also have to think about possible solutions. Or you might have to think about, if you were the character, how would you solve that particular problem? Or how would they deal, or how would you deal with that particular conflict? Think about a student who witnessed her friend, her very best friend, cheating in a test. Let's say the test is a spelling test. She might have internal conflict. She may have, in other words, character versus self type of conflict, because she has to wrestle between informing a teacher that she witnessed her friend cheating during this maths or spelling test, or she might have to consider, you know what, if I tell, I risk losing the friendship. I love my best friend. I want to remain friends with her. Maybe I shouldn't do it. So what would be the solution? What would be the solution if you were that particular character? How would you deal with it? That is something that we have to consider. So if we are given that question, how would you solve the problem? That is not going to be found. The answer is not going to be found in the passage, because the question asks, how would you solve the problem? So you have to give an answer that is reasonable, that is plausible, it makes sense, and it must be detailed. Because those kinds of questions, those are the on my own questions, they're coming from, the answers coming from here and possibly here. You have to come up with your own, and you want your answers to be insightful. You want your answers to be thoughtful when it comes to those on my own questions, because they are worth more marks than the other questions, which are lower order thinking questions. So we looked at identifying conflict. We recognize that conflict is the secret source of a story. And even when you're writing one of your own, you're writing a story, it's imperative that your character faces conflict, or else it's going to be a very boring story. We looked at different kinds of conflict. Some of those conflicts are external. One of them is internal. So the internal conflict is the character versus self that is happening here inside of you. The other types of conflict are external. For example, character versus character, character versus society, character versus nature, character versus the supernatural, and character versus technology. So that's it for this session on reading comprehension, skills and strategies. And I'll see you next time.